What if one of the most powerful secret societies in history didn't rule through armies or money, but through stories, symbols, and secrets hidden in plain sight? #10. The mysterious birth of the Priory of Sion. The story of the Priory of Sion begins with a claim so bold that it immediately hooks the imagination. According to its own legends, this secret society was founded in 1099, during the time of the First Crusade, with the mission of protecting a sacred bloodline said to descend from Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. That alone would be enough to ignite centuries of fascination. But here's where things get interesting. There is no solid medieval evidence proving that such an organization existed in that era at all. No charters, no contemporary chronicles, no monastery records, nothing. And yet, the Priory of Sion refuses to fade away. Instead of appearing clearly in the Middle Ages, the Priory emerges much later, officially registered in France in the mid-20th century as a small civic association. On paper, it looked harmless, even boring. But behind that legal shell was a carefully constructed myth, one that blended medieval symbolism, Christian theology, royal bloodlines, and secret guardianship into a single, irresistible narrative. Think of it like a historical thriller written backwards, starting with the ending and then planting clues throughout the past. For an American audience, the comparison is almost cinematic. Imagine discovering that a local historical society in a quiet town suddenly claimed it had been secretly guiding world events since the Crusades. At first you'd laugh, then you'd start noticing how many powerful names, symbols, and coincidences seem to orbit around it. The Priory of Sion works exactly like that. It invites disbelief, then rewards curiosity. What makes this origin story so compelling is not whether it's true, but how well it was designed. The Priory's narrative borrows credibility from familiar medieval touchstones, Templars, Crusader vows, sacred relics, and stitches them together into something that feels ancient, even if it isn't. The lack of evidence doesn't weaken the myth. In many ways, it strengthens it. After all, a perfect secret leaves no trace. By presenting itself as older than kings, older than modern nations, the Priory of Sion positions itself beyond normal historical scrutiny, and that is its first great trick. Whether real or invented, the idea of the Priory became powerful enough to take on a life of its own, shaping books, documentaries, and pop culture long after its supposed founders were gone. #9 The Dossiers Secrets and the Art of Manufactured Proof. If the Priory of Sion has a smoking gun, it's something known as the Dossiers Secrets. These documents were quietly placed in France's National Library, where anyone could theoretically find them. They contain genealogies, cryptic diagrams, and references to a secret order safeguarding a divine bloodline tied to ancient European royalty. To a casual reader, they look like forgotten historical records. To conspiracy researchers, they were explosive. But here's the catch: the documents were planted. The Dossiers Secrets weren't medieval discoveries at all. They were modern creations, carefully designed to look old, complex, and authoritative. And that's what makes them fascinating. Instead of hiding the evidence, the creators did the opposite. They made sure it was publicly accessible, knowing that people trust archives, libraries, and official institutions. It's the same psychological effect Americans feel when they hear declassified government files. The setting alone gives the information weight. What the dossiers did brilliantly was blur the line between fact and fiction. They mixed real historical figures with invented connections. Genuine royal family trees were subtly altered. Authentic place names were paired with speculative claims. The result was a puzzle that looked scholarly enough to demand attention, but vague enough to avoid easy debunking, and it worked. Researchers spent years trying to decode these papers, tracing symbols, comparing names, and hunting for hidden messages. Every unanswered question made the Priory of Sion seem deeper and more mysterious. Instead of asking, "Is this real?" people started asking, "Why would someone go to this much trouble if it wasn't?" This is where the Priory's genius truly shines. The Dossiers Secrets functioned like a viral marketing campaign decades before the internet. They didn't tell people what to think, they invited them to investigate. And once you invest time and effort into unraveling a mystery, it becomes psychologically harder to accept that the mystery itself might be artificial. In a very American sense, this mirrors the appeal of long-running conspiracy theories. The more documents, charts, and footnotes involved, the more serious it feels. The Priory of Sion didn't need armies or wealth. It only needed paper, patience, and a deep understanding of human curiosity. By the time scholars began exposing the documents as modern forgeries, the idea of the Priory had already escaped the page. It had become a legend, one that no simple historical correction could erase. Number 8 Rennes les Chateau and the curse of the sudden fortune. Every great secret society needs a physical location that feels cursed, blessed, or both at the same time. For the Priory of Sion, that place is the small hilltop village of Rennes-le-Château in southern France. On its own, it's unremarkable, quiet streets, stone houses, and a church that looks no different from dozens of others in the region. But in the late 19th century, this village became the center of one of the strangest mysteries in European history. The story revolves around a local priest named Berenger Saunier. By all normal measures, Saunier should have lived and died poor. His parish was tiny, his salary was modest. And yet, after renovating the church, he suddenly became inexplicably wealthy. He funded lavish restorations, built private estates, hosted influential guests, and spent money at a rate that made no sense for a rural priest. Naturally, people started asking questions. According to Priory of Sion mythology, Saunier discovered hidden documents during the church renovation, documents that revealed secrets about royal bloodlines, ancient guardianship, and possibly the same sacred lineage the Priory claimed to protect. The implication was clear. Rennes-le-Château wasn't just a village, it was a vault. For modern viewers, especially Americans raised on stories of buried treasure and secret maps, this narrative hits hard. It feels like national treasure, but without the Hollywood polish. A small town nobody stumbles onto something ancient and powerful, and suddenly, history itself bends around him. Historians, however, tell a less glamorous story. Saunier's wealth can largely be explained by the mass selling of church masses, technically legal at the time, but ethically questionable. No hidden parchments, no secret royal truths, just aggressive fundraising and accounting tricks. But here's the problem: the rational explanation is boring. The mystery version isn't. The Priory of Sion latched onto Rennes-le-Château because it gave their story geography. It gave people somewhere to point to on a map and say, something happened here. And once a place becomes mythologized, every cracked stone and faded symbol becomes potential evidence. Even today, tourists visit the village searching for signs, convinced that the truth is still hidden, just beneath their feet. Whether Saunier found secrets or not almost doesn't matter anymore. Rennes-le-Château became a living prop in the Priory's story, a reminder that mystery feels more real when it has a physical address. Number 7 The Merovingians and the sacred bloodline claim. At the heart of the Priory of Sion's most controversial claim is a royal family most people have never heard of, the Merovingian dynasty. These early medieval kings ruled parts of what is now France centuries before Charlemagne. They were strange figures by modern standards, warrior kings wrapped in religious symbolism, rumored to possess divine ancestry, and surrounded by legends of supernatural power. According to Priory of Sion lore, the Merovingians weren't just rulers, they were bloodline carriers. The claim suggests that their lineage descended from Jesus Christ himself, through Mary Magdalene, and that this sacred bloodline survived by quietly merging into European nobility. The Priory's supposed mission was to protect this lineage until the right moment. From a storytelling perspective, this is brilliant. It ties Christianity, royalty, and secrecy into a single narrative thread. For American audiences familiar with superhero origin stories, The Merovingians are framed almost like chosen heirs, ordinary rulers carrying an extraordinary secret. Historically, though, the claim collapses under scrutiny. There is no credible evidence linking Jesus to France, let alone to a medieval royal family. The Merovingians were real? Yes, but their supposed divine ancestry appears to be a later invention, grafted onto existing myths to give the Priory's story depth and legitimacy. Still, the symbolism works. By choosing an obscure dynasty instead of famous names like the Tudors or the Bourbons, the Priory avoided obvious contradictions. The Merovingians sit in that hazy zone of history where records are thin and legends flourish. That ambiguity becomes fertile ground for speculation. What's fascinating is how this idea resonated across modern culture. Once introduced, the sacred bloodline concept began spreading far beyond the Priory itself. It showed up in books, documentaries, and eventually blockbuster fiction. People didn't need to believe it fully, they only needed to believe it could be possible. And that's the real power of the Priory of Sion narrative. It doesn't demand faith, it invites curiosity. By tying its story to a half-forgotten dynasty, it created a bridge between established history and imaginative possibility. Even when scholars reject the claim outright, the idea continues to linger, whispered as a what-if rather than declared as fact. In the end, the Merovingians serve as the Priory's most important symbol. Not because they prove anything, but because they make the impossible feel just believable enough to keep people searching. Number 6. The legendary Grand Masters and the power of famous names. One of the most effective ways the Priory of Sion amplified its mystique was by attaching itself to history's most admired minds. According to the documents linked to the order, the Priory was allegedly led over the centuries by a line of Grand Masters, figures whose names instantly command respect. Among them appears Leonardo da Vinci, alongside other intellectual and cultural giants. The message is subtle but powerful. If minds like these were involved, the secret must be real. From a modern American perspective, this tactic feels familiar. Think about how credibility spreads online today. Attach a bold idea to a trusted authority, and suddenly it sounds less like speculation and more like revelation. The Priory of Sion did this centuries before social media existed, using history's most admired figures as its influencers. Leonardo is the most striking example. Painter, engineer, anatomist, inventor, his reputation already borders on the mythical. The idea that he might also have been a secret guardian of forbidden knowledge feels almost natural. His cryptic notebooks, mirror writing, and fascination with geometry seem to invite that interpretation. Supporters of the Priory claim that hidden symbols in his artwork point towards secret truths about sacred bloodlines and suppressed Christian history. But when historians step in, the picture changes dramatically. There is no reliable evidence that Leonardo ever belonged to such an organization. His notebooks, while complex, reflect a relentless scientific curiosity rather than secret religious allegiance. The lists naming him as a Grand Master were compiled centuries after his death, based on no contemporary records. Still, the damage or the magic was already done. By the time scholars pointed out these inconsistencies, the idea had already taken root in popular imagination. The Priory of Sion understood something fundamental about human psychology. We are more likely to believe extraordinary claims when they are endorsed by extraordinary people. Even if the connection is fabricated, the emotional impact remains. What's especially clever is how this strategy shields the Priory from direct attack. Debunking the claim requires questioning not only the organization, but also reinterpreting beloved historical figures. Many people would rather suspend disbelief than dismantle a story that makes their heroes feel even more mysterious. In the end, the Grand Master's narrative wasn't designed to prove anything, it was designed to persuade. By borrowing the credibility of history's giants, the Priory of Sion elevated itself from an obscure secret society into a legend woven through the fabric of Western culture. Number 5. Sacred geometry, symbols, and the illusion of hidden order. Another cornerstone of the Priory of Sion mythos is the idea that sacred geometry and ancient symbols reveal a hidden order beneath history itself. According to the narrative, the Priory encoded its secrets into architecture, art, and landscapes using mathematical patterns that only the initiated could recognize. Churches, monuments, and even entire cities were supposedly laid out according to divine designs. At first glance, this sounds esoteric, even mystical. But it's also deeply appealing. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We want the world to make sense, to follow rules, to hide meaning beneath chaos. The Priory of Sion story taps directly into that instinct. Supporters point to alignments, ratios, and geometric shapes found in medieval buildings and Renaissance art, arguing that these patterns prove the existence of a coordinated secret plan. Lines drawn across maps appear to connect sacred sites. Proportions in paintings seem too precise to be accidental. To believers, these aren't coincidences, they are signatures. For an American audience raised on code-breaking stories and puzzle-based mysteries, this approach feels irresistible. It turns history into an escape room. Every symbol might be a clue. Every measurement might be intentional, and once you start looking, you start finding patterns everywhere. Historians and architects, however, offer a far simpler explanation. Sacred geometry was widely used in religious architecture because it symbolized harmony, divinity, and order, not because it hid secret bloodlines. Medieval builders weren't encoding conspiracies, they were expressing theology through math. Circles, squares, and ratios like the golden mean were spiritual tools, not covert messages. But here's where the Priory's brilliance shows again. The explanation doesn't matter as much as the experience. Once someone feels they've seen a hidden pattern, it becomes personal. It feels like discovery, not indoctrination. And personal discoveries are the hardest to let go of. The Priory of Sion narrative doesn't tell people what symbols mean. It invites them to interpret. That openness creates endless theories, each reinforcing the sense that something deeper must be going on. Even contradictory interpretations can coexist, because ambiguity fuels engagement rather than shutting it down. In the end, sacred geometry becomes less about proof and more about perception. The Priory didn't need to hide real secrets in stone and paint. It only needed to suggest that secrets might be there. Once the idea takes hold, the patterns appear on their own. And that illusion of hidden order of meaning just beyond reach is what keeps the Priory of Sion alive in the modern imagination, long after its historical foundations have crumbled. Number for pop culture, the Da Vinci Code, and the explosion of the myth for decades, the Priory of Sion lingered on the fringes of obscure history books and niche conspiracy circles. Then pop culture happened, and everything changed overnight. The turning point came when modern fiction discovered how perfectly the Priory's mythology fit the structure of a blockbuster thriller. Ancient secrets, hidden symbols, a suppressed truth guarded by a shadowy organization. It was a storyteller's dream. That dream reached its peak with the Da Vinci Code. The novel didn't invent the Priory of Sion, but it amplified it beyond anything its creators could have imagined. Suddenly, millions of readers around the world were encountering the name for the first time, not in footnotes or fringe essays, but in a fast-paced narrative that blurred fact and fiction with surgical precision. For American audiences especially, this was the perfect storm. The story felt rebellious, intellectual, and dangerous all at once. It suggested that history as taught in schools was incomplete, sanitized, or deliberately misleading. And it offered the reader something intoxicating, the feeling of being let in on a secret. What mattered most wasn't whether the claims were true. What mattered was how they felt. The Priory of Sion became shorthand for hidden truth itself. People began Googling names, visiting churches, and tracing symbols, convinced that if a novel could weave together so many real details, there had to be something real at the core. Historians pushed back quickly, pointing out that the book openly labeled itself as fiction and relied heavily on already debunked sources. But by then, it was too late. The Priory of Sion had crossed a threshold. It was no longer just a claim, it was a cultural idea. This is a uniquely modern phenomenon. In earlier centuries, myth spread slowly, carried by rumor and word of mouth. In the age of mass media, a single story can redefine how millions perceive history. The Priory's narrative didn't need to convince everyone. It only needed to spark curiosity, and curiosity, once ignited, does the rest of the work. What's fascinating is how the Priory survived this explosion without collapsing under scrutiny. Even when readers learned that many claims were exaggerated or false, the emotional impact remained. The idea that history might be hiding something, that institutions might have motives to suppress certain truths, resonated deeply, especially in a culture already skeptical of authority. In that sense, pop culture didn't just popularize the Priory of Sion, it completed its transformation. What began as a constructed myth became a shared cultural reference point, immune to simple debunking because it now lived in imagination rather than archives. Number 3. Intelligence agencies, hoaxes, and the shadow of state power. One of the most persistent rumors surrounding the Priory of Sion is the claim that intelligence agencies were somehow involved in its creation or protection. According to this theory, the Priory wasn't just a private hoax or eccentric obsession. It was a psychological operation designed to distract, mislead, or test how narratives spread through society. At first, this sounds far-fetched, but when you examine the historical context, it becomes more intriguing. The 20th century was an era obsessed with information control. Governments experimented with propaganda, disinformation, and social influence on an unprecedented scale. In that environment, a carefully crafted myth like the Priory of Sion doesn't seem entirely out of place. Supporters of this theory point to how the Priory's documents appeared in official institutions, how they avoided immediate removal, and how long it took for definitive debunking to gain traction. To them, this suggests tolerance at best, cooperation at worst. The idea is not that intelligence agencies believed the Priory's claims, but that they recognized its usefulness. For an American viewer familiar with Cold War psyops and declassified experiments, this idea hits a nerve. We know governments sometimes manipulate narratives, not always to convince, but to confuse. A mystery that absorbs public attention can be more effective than a lie that demands belief. However, when historians dig deeper, the intelligence angle becomes harder to support. There is no credible evidence showing official sponsorship or strategic intent behind the Priory of Sion. What does emerge instead is something both simpler and more unsettling. The myth didn't need state backing. It exploited existing systems of trust on its own. Libraries, academic language, genealogical charts, and historical symbols already carry authority. By placing falsehoods inside those frameworks, the creators of the Priory effectively hijacked credibility without needing institutional power. The state didn't have to be involved. The structure was already there. Yet the intelligence theory persists because it offers a sense of scale. A lone hoax feels disappointing. A coordinated manipulation feels profound. People want mysteries to be proportional to their impact. If the Priory captivated millions, surely it must have been guided by powerful hands. In reality, the Priory of Sion demonstrates something far more disturbing. You don't need secret agencies to shape belief. You only need a compelling story, strategic placement, and patience. Once released, the narrative sustains itself, defended not by officials, but by the very people drawn to it. That realization may be the most uncomfortable truth of all. The Priory didn't expose hidden power. It revealed how easily meaning can be manufactured and how eagerly we participate in preserving it once it feels important. Part 5, Number 2. The Holy Grail Reimagined. From sacred relic to dangerous idea. For centuries, the Holy Grail was imagined as a physical object, a cup, a chalice, a sacred relic lost to time. Knights searched for it. Legends grew around it. But the Priory of Sion introduced a radical reinterpretation that completely changed the game. According to its mythology, the Grail was never an object at all. It was a bloodline, a living lineage descending from Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, hidden within European royalty and protected in secrecy. This shift was revolutionary. By turning the Grail into an idea rather than a thing, the Priory made it impossible to conclusively find or disprove. You can lose a cup, you can destroy a relic, but a bloodline, that can be hidden, diluted, and quietly preserved across centuries. From a narrative standpoint, it's brilliant. For American audiences, this idea resonates deeply with modern storytelling. It mirrors the way power is often portrayed today, not as something visible, but as something embedded, hidden influence, legacy networks, inherited privilege. The Grail as bloodline concept feels less like medieval fantasy and more like a metaphor for how power actually works in the real world. Historically, of course, there is no evidence supporting this claim. Early Christian texts do not mention Jesus having children. The association with Mary Magdalene emerges much later, shaped by reinterpretation rather than documentation. But the Priory's version doesn't rely on proof, it relies on plausibility. What makes this idea so persistent is that it reframes Christianity itself. Instead of a divine sacrifice ending a story, it suggests continuation, family, survival, secrecy, that challenges institutional authority in a subtle but powerful way. If the Grail is a bloodline, then the Church isn't the final guardian of sacred truth. Someone else is, and that implication alone is enough to keep the theory alive. Once introduced, this reimagined Grail spread far beyond the Priory. It became a recurring theme in books, films, and documentaries, often detached entirely from its original source. People who have never heard of the Priory of Sion still discuss the Grail as a bloodline without realizing where the idea came from. In that sense, the Priory succeeded beyond its wildest ambitions. It didn't just propose an alternative history. It permanently altered how a core myth of Western civilization could be understood. Even when rejected intellectually, the idea lingers emotionally because it feels like a secret that could matter. Number 1. The Priory of Sion's real legacy, a masterclass in belief creation. When all the documents are examined, all the claims dissected, and all the myths stripped away, one truth remains undeniable. The Priory of Sion, as a historical secret society guarding ancient bloodlines, almost certainly never existed. But, as a phenomenon, as a lesson, its impact is very real. The true legacy of the Priory of Sion is not hidden treasure or divine lineage. It's demonstration, a demonstration of how easily belief can be constructed, sustained, and defended even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. It showed that you don't need power to create influence, you need narrative. The creators of the Priory understood something fundamental about human nature. People don't just want facts, they want meaning, they want mystery. They want to feel like history still has unfinished business. The Priory offered all of that in one elegant package, wrapped in symbols, names, and unanswered questions. For a modern American viewer, this should feel uncomfortably familiar. We live in an era where stories spread faster than verification, where complexity is mistaken for depth, and where skepticism often arrives too late. The Priory of Sion didn't exploit technology. It exploited psychology. What's most striking is how resilient the myth has proven to be. Even after its central architect admitted to fabricating much of the story, interest didn't vanish. Instead, the confession became part of the mystery. Was it all fake? Or was the confession itself a cover? Once doubt enters the system, certainty becomes impossible. That's the final trick. The Priory of Sion created a closed loop of belief. Evidence against it becomes evidence of suppression. Silence becomes confirmation, and curiosity becomes commitment. This is not medieval thinking. It's modern. It's happening all around us. In the end, the Priory of Sion doesn't ask us to believe in secret societies or sacred bloodlines. It challenges us to examine how easily we accept stories that feel profound. It reminds us that the most powerful secrets aren't hidden in vaults or buried beneath churches. They're hidden in how we interpret information, authority, and truth itself. And that may be the most unsettling fact of all. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like and share it with anyone who loves hidden history and untold mysteries. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next deep dive into secret societies, forbidden knowledge, and the stories history doesn't want you to question. Join the channel to unlock exclusive members-only content, behind-the-scenes research, and extended episodes. And if you want to support our work directly, tap the thanks button below. Every contribution helps us keep uncovering the secrets hiding in plain sight.